The letter came on a Tuesday morning in March. Mehmet Yilmaz held it with both hands, standing in the narrow hallway of his Stuttgart apartment. The paper was heavy, official, the kind that carries weight before you even read it. His fingers left small damp prints on the corners. Outside, rain tapped against the window in steady rhythm. Inside, the hallway smelled of yesterday's dinner, lamb and rice, still lingering. His daughter was humming in the next room, practicing her German verbs for school. Mehmet read the first line 3 times. Each time the number stayed the same. 87,000 Deutsche Marks, due in 45 days, for a loan he never took, for a business he never owned, for a man he barely remembered. His wife found him 20 minutes later, still standing there. The letter had fallen to the floor. Mehmet Yilmaz was 41 years old when the letter arrived. He had lived in Stuttgart for 19 years, ever since he left his village in eastern Turkey at 22, following his older brother Hassan, who had come 2 years earlier. The journey had been long. Train from Ankara to Istanbul, ferry across to Greece, another train through Yugoslavia. He remembered sleeping on his coat, using his small suitcase as a pillow. He remembered the cold. Stuttgart in 1980 was grey and efficient and nothing like home. The factory where Mehmet found work made automobile parts. He worked the night shift, 10 hours standing at a machine that stamped metal into shapes. The noise was constant, a rhythmic pounding that entered his bones. But the pay was regular. That was what mattered. Regular pay meant sending money home. It meant eventually bringing his young wife Aishi to Germany. It meant, 3 years later, holding his daughter Elif in his arms for the first time in a Stuttgart hospital, her face red and furious and perfect. By 1999, Mehmet's life had fallen into a comfortable pattern. He still worked at the factory, though he had moved to day shift 5 years ago. His German was functional, flavored with a thick accent he had long stopped trying to hide. Elif was 16, top of her class, talking about university. She wanted to be a doctor. Aishi worked part-time at a Turkish grocery store on Hauptstädter Straße, where she could speak her own language and laugh with other women who understood what it meant to build a life in a place that would always be a little bit foreign. They lived in a 3-room apartment on the 4th floor. No elevator. Mehmet climbed those stairs twice a day, morning and evening. The building was old, built just after the war, with thick walls and narrow windows. Their savings account had 17,000 marks in it. Not much, but enough for emergencies, enough to feel safe. Every Sunday, Mehmet went to the Turkish community center on Wilhelmstrasse. He played backgammon with other men from his region. They drank tea from small glasses. They complained about German bureaucracy and bragged about their children and remembered, with that particular nostalgia of the displaced, how things were better back home. Even though they all knew that wasn't quite true, even though none of them had any real plans to return. Mehmet was quiet by nature, a listener more than a talker. He smiled easily but spoke carefully. He had learned early that in Germany, silence was often safer than broken German. He paid his taxes on time. He never missed a rent payment. He kept his head down, and his family fed and asked very little from the world except to be left alone to live his modest, careful life. On the morning the letter came, Mehmet had been about to leave for his shift. He had kissed Aishi on the cheek. He had told Elif to study hard. He had put on his blue work jacket, the one with his name stitched over the pocket in crooked letters. He had been thinking about nothing in particular, maybe what Aishi was making for dinner, maybe whether he should buy new shoes. His old ones were developing a hole near the left toe. The letter changed everything before he even finished reading it. The confusion came first, then denial. Mehmet read the letter again, slowly, his lips moving with each German word. Zahlungsaufforderung, payment demand. The words were formal, bureaucratic, as cold as the paper they were printed on. According to the Deutsche Credit Bank, Mehmet was liable for a business loan taken out in 1984 by one Kemal Özdemir. The loan had been for a restaurant. The restaurant had failed in 1991. Kemal had declared bankruptcy in 1992 and left Germany shortly after. The bank had pursued other avenues of collection for 7 years. Now, under German Civil Code section 765, they were exercising their right to collect from the Bürge, the guarantor, the co-signer, Mehmet Yilmaz. But he had never co-signed anything. He was certain of that. He had never guaranteed anyone's loan. He barely knew Kemal Özdemir. They had been acquaintances, nothing more. Men who drank tea at the same community center. Men who nodded hello and exchanged pleasantries about the weather. Mehmet called the bank that afternoon. He took time off work, losing half a day's pay. The woman on the phone was polite but firm. She had an efficient voice. She asked for his identification number. She pulled up his file. Yes, she confirmed. He was listed as Bürger on loan number 847293K, issued April 17, 1984. His signature was on file. Mehmet's throat went dry. He asked to see the signature. He needed proof. The woman said he could make an appointment. The earliest available was in 11 days. He made the appointment. Then he sat at the kitchen table and tried to remember 1984, 15 years ago. Elif had been 1 year old. Hassan had still been alive before the heart attack took him in 1988. What had happened in April 1984? He searched his memory like a man searching a dark room, feeling along walls for a light switch that might not exist. Aishi found him there 2 hours later, staring at nothing. The days before the appointment stretched like wire pulled too tight. Mehmet went to work. He came home. He said little. At night he lay awake, listening to Aishi breathe beside him, trying to reconstruct a moment from 15 years ago that he could not find in his mind. He asked around at the community center carefully, not wanting to spread alarm. Did anyone remember Kemal Özdemir? The restaurant he had opened? Most men shrugged. One older man, Mahmud, remembered vaguely. The restaurant had been on Böblinger Straße. It lasted maybe 2 years. Bad location, too much competition. Kemal had dreams bigger than his business sense. Had Mehmet been involved? Mahmud looked puzzled. Not that he remembered. Why? Mehmet changed the subject. The appointment at the bank was on a Friday afternoon. Mehmet took the whole day off. He wore his best shirt, the white one Aishi had ironed that morning. He took the S-Bahn to the city center. The bank building was modern, all glass and steel. Inside everything was beige and quiet. Soft carpet, softer music, the smell of coffee and printer ink. He waited 35 minutes. Then a young man in a dark suit led him to a small office. The young man's name was Herr Schneider. He had thin glasses and manicured nails. He opened a folder and slid a document across the desk. "This is the original loan agreement," Herr Schneider said. "Your signature is here. And here." Mehmet looked at the paper. It was yellowed with age. The print was faint. There were multiple signatures. The borrower, the bank officer, and at the bottom, in a section marked Bürger, a signature that looked something like his name, Mehmet Yilmaz. The handwriting was hurried. The letters barely legible. "That is not my signature," Mehmet said quietly. Herr Schneider's expression did not change. He had clearly heard this before. "Do you have evidence of forgery? A handwriting expert's analysis? A police report from 1984? Mehmet had none of these things. He had not even known the document existed until 9 days ago. "The law is clear," Herr Schneider continued. "If you wish to dispute this, you must provide proof within 30 days of our initial notification. After that, we proceed with collection. This can include wage garnishment, asset seizure, or legal action." "But I did not sign this," Mehmet repeated. His voice was steady, but his hands, resting on his knees under the desk, were trembling. Herr Schneider closed the folder. "I understand this is difficult," he said, "but the bank has followed all legal procedures. The loan was issued in good faith. The borrower defaulted. As the guarantor on record, you are legally liable. This is how the system works." The system? As if that explained everything. As if being crushed by machinery was acceptable because the machinery was labeled correctly. Mehmet left the bank in a daze. Outside, Stuttgart continued its day. Trams moved in straight lines. People walked with purpose. The sky was the color of old newsprint. He stood on the sidewalk and felt, for the first time since arriving in Germany 19 years ago, completely lost. That evening, he told Aishi everything. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "We fight it. We get a lawyer." They did. The lawyer's name was Frau Richter. Her office was small, above a bakery. She listened to Mehmet's story. She examined the document copy he had requested from the bank. She looked at him with something that might have been sympathy, but was more likely resignation. "This is difficult," she said. "Under German law, specifically the Bürgerliches Gesetzbuch, the code that governs guarantees, a Bürger is liable for the full debt. The burden of proof for forgery is on you, Herr Yilmaz. After 15 years, that proof is nearly impossible to establish." "But what if I genuinely did not sign?" Mehmet asked. "Then someone forged your signature," Frau Richter said. "But proving that now requires forensic analysis, which is expensive. And even if we prove forgery, we must then prove you did not knowingly allow your signature to be used. This becomes very complicated." "How much," Mehmet asked, "would this cost?" "To fight?" Frau Richter looked at her desk. "Legal fees for a case like this could be 20,000 marks, maybe more, with no guarantee of success." Mehmet did not have 20,000 marks. He had 17,000 in savings, and now 87,000 in debt. There was one memory that surfaced in those weeks, hazy and incomplete, like something seen through fog. Spring 1984. Kemal Özdemir had been excited about his restaurant. He had been talking about it at the community center for months. One day, Kemal had brought papers. He was gathering signatures for something. Mehmet could not remember what. A petition? A letter of recommendation? Something about showing the bank that he had community support. Had Mehmet signed something that day? He thought maybe he had. A casual gesture, helping a fellow Turk trying to build something in a foreign country. He would have signed without reading. His German was poor then. The document had probably been in German. Someone would have translated vaguely. Kemal needs signatures from people who know him, to show he is trusted. "Can you sign here?" And Mehmet, wanting to be helpful, wanting to be part of the community, would have signed, never understanding, never imagining, never knowing that in Germany, in this careful, rule-bound country, the word witness did not mean what he thought it meant. In Turkey, if a friend asks you to sign something, you sign. It is a gesture of trust, of brotherhood. The consequences belong to the person who borrows, not the person who vouches. But Germany was not Turkey. Germany was a place where every signature carried legal weight, where contracts were iron, where the system had long teeth and perfect memory. The concept of Bürgschaft, the legal guarantee, has deep roots in German civil law. It is a mechanism designed to protect lenders. If someone borrows money, the bank can require a Bürger, a guarantor. This person pledges their own assets as collateral. If the borrower defaults, the Bürg becomes fully liable, not partially, fully, for the entire debt, plus interest, plus fees. This system exists in many countries, but Germany's version is particularly strict. The Bürger can be pursued even years after the original default. There is no statute of limitations for debt collection. The bank simply must prove that the signature exists and that notification was properly given. Once those conditions are met, the full force of law swings behind the creditor. For immigrants in 1980s Germany, this system was a minefield. Many came from countries where business was conducted on trust and handshakes, where written contracts were rare, where the concept of co-signing was informal. When banks required guarantees for business loans, immigrant entrepreneurs often turned to friends and family. And those friends and family, wanting to help, signed documents they did not fully understand. The language barrier made it worse. Legal German is dense and technical. Even native speakers struggle with contract language. For someone with limited German, trying to pass a Bürgschaft agreement was nearly impossible, and few immigrants had the money to hire lawyers to review documents before signing. But ignorance, under German law, is not a defense. If you sign, you are bound. Period. The intention does not matter, only the signature. By the early 1990s, this had created a small crisis. Hundreds of Turkish immigrants found themselves liable for loans taken by failed businesses. Many lost their savings. Some lost their homes. A few lost everything and had to return to Turkey, defeated and broken. The German government knew about this. Consumer protection advocates raised alarms. But the law remained unchanged. Creditor rights took precedence. The system worked as designed. For the banks, it was simple mathematics. Immigrant-owned businesses had high failure rates. Requiring guarantees meant the bank's risk was distributed. If the business failed, the guarantor would pay. It was efficient. It was legal. It was, in the cold calculation of finance, fair. For the guarantors, it was devastation. Mehmet tried to negotiate. He went back to the bank. He offered to pay what he could. He asked for reduced interest. He asked for a payment plan. The bank said yes, they could arrange a payment plan. 87,000 marks, paid over 10 years with interest. The monthly payment would be 1,090 marks. Mehmet's monthly take-home pay, after taxes, was 2,200 marks. His rent was 750 marks. Food, utilities, transport and basic expenses took another 900 marks. That left 550 marks per month. The bank wanted 1,090. The mathematics were impossible. He could not pay the debt and maintain his family. One had to give. He tried finding a second job. He worked weekends at a warehouse, loading trucks. He came home exhausted. He earned an extra 400 marks per month. It was still not enough. Aishi took extra shift at the grocery store. She worked 6 days a week. Elif stopped asking for new clothes. She wore the same 3 outfits to school, rotating them, washing them by hand to save money on the laundry. They stopped buying meat. They stopped going out. They cut every expense they could. And still, the debt grew faster than they could pay. The bank began garnishing Mehmet's wages directly. Every month, a portion of his paycheck was redirected to the debt before he ever saw it. The amount left was barely enough to cover rent and food. They emptied their savings. All 17,000 marks gone. The debt barely noticed. Mehmet stopped sleeping through the night. He would wake at 3 in the morning, his heart pounding, and lie in the dark doing calculations in his head. Math that never worked. Numbers that never added up. He lost weight. His face became drawn. His eyes developed dark circles that never faded. At work, his supervisor noticed his performance slipping. The mistakes were small at first, a part placed incorrectly, a machine left running too long, then bigger, a damaged shipment, a missed deadline. In November 2001, 2.5 years after the letter arrived, Mehmet was called into the supervisor's office. "We have to let you go," the supervisor said. "I am sorry. You are a good man. But we cannot have these mistakes." Mehmet was 43 years old. He had worked at that factory for 19 years. He had never been late. He had never complained. He had been a model employee until a debt he did not owe destroyed his ability to function. He looked for new work. But he was 43 with a limited education and no specialized skills. Factories were automating. Younger men with better German were chosen over him. He applied to 47 jobs over 3 months. He received 2 interviews, no offers. The unemployment benefits helped, but they were not enough. The debt payments continued. The bank did not care that he was unemployed. The garnishment switched to his benefits. In February 2002, Mehmet received another letter. The landlord was evicting them. 3 months of missed rent. The landlord was sympathetic but firm. He had his own bills to pay. They had 60 days to leave. Elif was 19 now. She had graduated secondary school with top marks. She had been accepted to university, medical school, her dream. But university required money they did not have. She told her parents she would defer for a year, work, help pay down the debt, then reapply. 1 year became 2, then 3. She worked at a call center, then as a waitress. She gave every cent to her parents. Her dream of medicine faded like a photograph left in sun. The colors bleached away. The image still there, but lifeless. The Yilmaz family moved to a smaller apartment, 2 rooms instead of 3, on the outskirts of Stuttgart, where rent was cheaper and buildings older and neighbors louder. Elif slept on a mattress in the living room. The walls were thin. They could hear arguments from next door, footsteps from upstairs, a baby crying somewhere in the building, always at night. Aishi stopped smiling. She moved through days like a woman underwater, slow, effortful, every task requiring immense energy. She developed migraines, blinding headaches that forced her to lie in a dark room for hours. The grocery store let her go. Unreliable, they said. Too many sick days. The debt was still there, growing, interest compounding. fees adding, a living thing that fed on their lives. By 2004, 5 years after the letter, Mehmet had aged a decade. His hair had gone grey. His back had developed a permanent stoop. He looked like a man of 60, not 46. He took odd jobs, cleaning offices at night, washing dishes at restaurants, work that paid cash under the table, work that men do when the formal economy has no use for them. He walked through Stuttgart and felt like a ghost. This city where he had spent more than half his life. This place he had tried so hard to make home. It had taken everything, and it was not even personal. That was the cruelest part. The bank was not evil. The landlord was not a villain. The system was not designed to destroy him specifically. He was simply caught in machinery that ground on, indifferent, crushing anything in its path. One evening in late autumn, Mehmet sat at the small table in their small apartment. Aishi was at the sink, washing dishes by hand. They could not afford the dishwasher's electricity. Elif was at work, her third shift that week. The apartment was cold. They kept the heat off to save money. Mehmet looked at his hands. They were the hands of a man who had worked all his life, calloused, scarred, honest hands. He thought about that signature, the one he may or may not have made in a moment 15 years ago, a casual gesture, a favor for an acquaintance. The signature was free. The cost of the pen was nothing. The effort minimal. The price, though, the price was everything. His savings, his job, his home, his daughter's future, his wife's health, his own mind. Everything he had spent 20 years building in this country dismantled piece by piece because of a signature that took 3 seconds to write. He wondered if Kemal Özdemir, wherever he was, ever thought about this. If he knew what his failed restaurant had cost. If he cared. Probably not. Kemal had moved on. Kemal was free. The debt had found a different target. Mehmet wanted to be angry, but anger required energy he did not have. Instead, there was only a deep grey exhaustion, the kind that settles into bones and never leaves. He was not angry at Kemal. He was not even angry at the bank. He was simply tired. So tired. Outside it started to rain. The sound was familiar now. Stuttgart rain. Cold and steady. It would rain through the night and into the morning. It would still be raining when he woke, if he slept at all. It would rain on the city that had been his home for 24 years, but had never truly been his. The city that had given him work and taken everything else. The city where signatures had weight and mercy had none. The debt was never fully paid. By 2007, Mehmet had managed to negotiate a settlement. The bank accepted 30,000 marks as full payment, acknowledging that extracting the rest was impossible. Mehmet had no assets left to seize, no wages to garnish. He was, in financial terms, worthless. The bank wrote off the remaining balance as a loss. It appeared on a spreadsheet somewhere, a small red number, quickly forgotten. But for the Yilmaz family, the damage was permanent. Elif never went to university. She still worked service jobs, now 39 years old, living in a shared apartment with 2 roommates. Her childhood dream of medicine a story she no longer tells. Aishi developed chronic depression. She takes medication that helps dull the edges, but never quite lifts the weight. Mehmet works when he can. He is 66 now, too old for most jobs but too young to retire. His back aches constantly. His hands shake sometimes, a tremor he cannot control. They never speak about 1984. They never speak about the signature. There is nothing to say that has not been said. No new words that would change what happened. The past is a locked room they walk by every day, careful not to look through the window. The system that destroyed them continues unchanged. Bürgschaft remains part of German civil law. Banks still require guarantees. Immigrants still sign documents they do not fully understand. And somewhere, inevitably, another family is receiving a letter, learning that a signature they do not remember making has become a debt they cannot escape. The cruelty is not in the law itself. The cruelty is in the gap. The space between intention and consequence, between what someone thinks they are doing and what they are actually binding themselves to, between help and harm. That gap is where lives fall through. Mehmet Yilmaz signed a piece of paper in 1984. He thought he was being helpful. He thought he was supporting a fellow immigrant's dream. He thought the signature was free. In a way, it was. In every other way, it cost him everything that mattered. The price was not immediate, it came years later, but it came with interest, and it lasted forever. The story of Mehmet Yilmaz is one of thousands. Between 1980 and 2005, an estimated 4,000 immigrant families in Germany faced similar situations: failed businesses, forgotten signatures, sudden demands for payment. The vast majority could not pay. Many lost their homes. Many returned to their countries of origin financially ruined. A few, unable to bear the shame and pressure, did not survive. The German government did eventually reform the law. In 2002, new regulations required that Bürgschaft agreements include clear warnings in bold text. The warnings had to explain the full liability in simple language. Banks were required to verify that the guarantor understood the consequences. For new loans, the system became marginally safer, but the reform was not retroactive. Existing guarantees remained valid. Debts already owed stayed owed. For people like Mehmet, the reform came too late. It was like installing a fire alarm after the house had already burned. There are lessons here about legal systems, about protection of vulnerable populations, about the responsibility that comes with power. But lessons do not rebuild lives. They do not give back lost years. They do not restore dreams. Somewhere in Stuttgart, there is a file in a bank archive, loan number 847293K, marked as settled. Inside that file is a piece of paper from 1984. At the bottom, a signature, Mehmet Yilmaz. The ink has faded, the paper has yellowed, but the consequences remain, fresh as the day they arrived. Because some signatures, it turns out, never really fade at all. But Mehmet's story is not the only one buried in those archives. In the same bank, in the same filing system, there are other folders, other signatures, other lives changed by a moment they did not understand. One file, in particular, tells a different kind of story, not about a signature, but about a translation, about a woman who said yes in Turkish but did not know she was agreeing in German, about how a single word, misunderstood, can become a prison without walls. That story involves a widow, 2 children, and a house that was never really hers. That story is for another time.